Hello my friends, it is Amy Esther here, and today I have my special guest, my sweet husband Joshua, and we are going to talk about miscarriage from the spouse's perspective.
That's right.
Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel. If you've been here before, if you have not, consider hitting that subscribe button. I make videos about my life with several chronic illnesses. I have lots of chronic illnesses, including PCOS and endometriosis, which cause infertility, and Hashimoto's disease, which causes frequent miscarriages. So we deal with a lot of that over here. And then I also talk about all my chronic illnesses and just how I live life with all of these different problems that I have. So today I have my husband here because I have noticed that we deal with the grief and the pain very differently, and I think it's important to talk about the spouse's role and what he can do to help us and what we can do to understand the way that they deal with grief, because even woman to woman will deal differently, but especially women and men deal with grief so much different. And so today he is going to answer some questions. We're gonna do a little Q&A. Do you have anything you'd like to start with?
No, I'm just excited to hear the questions.
Okay. So, how did you feel and think after our first miscarriage?
I suppose I should say that what happened initially was I was already very nervous because she had been so unhealthy, not like unhealthy, but rather she had had so many problems with her illnesses that it was scary, and I already wasn't sure what was going to happen. So in some ways, I think I was prepared to hear that.
And did it change any with our recent one? So it was our third one.
Yeah, so third miscarriage, I mean, I was much more excited for the child. At this point, I just want our family to grow.
So if you haven't been here before, we do have a daughter who is 13 months old. So we have a child, and now that we know that love, I think that maybe is why you changed a little bit.
Yeah, that's a big part, and also having it now be a known quantity where it's like, okay, this is what it means to have a baby in the house. And now that I've done it once, it's like, okay, I could do that again, So, yeah, this last one was a lot harder in a lot of ways, just because you're more excited for the baby and you are just anxious for our daughter. I was so excited for her to have a brother or sister, and for her to be an older sister. I knew she would love that so much. So it doesn't really get you, at least it doesn't get me, like really deep down. It's a lot of just like you just kind of get angry and you're just mad, and you maybe want to lash out or just want to vent frustration. But it was a lot different from what I saw from her, where she became very recessed and very quiet, and kind of kept a lot of this grief to herself when she could, until I could try to get her to talk to me.
So that's a good way to go into our next question, which is, how did you cope with, we'll just specifically talk about this recent miscarriage just because it's the most on our minds, but how did you cope with that?
Mostly just distraction. I just try to keep my mind off of it, not focus on the negative parts of our life at that time. And really that can only get you so far, but after doing that for a little while, it sort of numbs the pain. And also what helped us cope, at least helped me cope, was discussing plans, saying, okay, well, what are we going to do? Are we going to keep trying? Are we going to try adoption, fostering,
fertility?
Yeah, fertility medication. Are we going to try surrogacy? I mean, being able to plan and say, we're not going to let this keep us down. We're going to keep moving forward, and we're going to find more solutions to our problems instead of just staying back and hanging out in that, hopelessness.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like this time around I was better at doing that, but I think as a woman it's hard because you're just like, well, I wanted that baby, and you're just like, it's hard to just not focus on that pregnancy loss. And I think it also depends on how far along you are. I think every week the further along you are, the harder it's gonna be. Ours this time was pretty early. We hadn't even seen an ultrasound yet, but I think the farther on it is going to be harder. But as the one who's pregnant, your partner may look at this differently. And I think men are more like, what are we going to do about this? How can we fix it? They're like fix it people. Just naturally, that's usually how men are. And we will grieve a little bit more. So just making sure that I just noticed the first time, like I felt like he didn't really care. But it was really that he just coped with it differently. He could distract himself a lot better than I could. I have a hard time. I think about it all the time, whether I'm watching a movie or I'm exercising or I'm doing something that should distract me. I'm still thinking about it. And it's like his brain is only in one place at a time. If he's at work, he's thinking about work.
The boxes.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you want to explain that.
You can link to that video.
Okay, I'll link to a video about how the men's brains are just in a certain box and women's are just going everywhere. And so I think you just remembering that our brains are different and that we're going to cope with it differently. And that I actually had the question, how did I react differently? I don't know if you wanted to answer
From
that.
my perspective?
Yeah.
What do you mean by differently than your...
Than you.
Than I did? Yeah. I would say that you were just so much more emotional about it, and it just kind of leaked into every facet of your life. You were just always thinking about it, and it didn't matter what was going on. You could be, eating dinner, and you would just sit there and twirl your fork and play with your food, and then suddenly just burst into tears. And I'm sitting there with my hamburger, and I'm just like, well, what do I do about this, right? Because you're not, and maybe this is part of another question later, but because you're not so connected to the pregnancy, I think that there's a disconnect that sort of prevents you from feeling almost to some extent like it was even real, right? It's easier to almost deny that it even happened, even though obviously your brain is just hard to get there, especially with a very early miscarriage.
Yeah, and as a woman, it's like you just feel that. You just know you're pregnant, you feel pregnant, and that's like we always talk about as women, like we feel pregnant, and that's how I knew I was miscarrying, is I just didn't feel pregnant anymore. And so
and
you can't really even explain that. Yeah, and then you take a test and it's like, yep, you're pregnant. It's hard to explain to someone who doesn't actually feel that. So what do you do to help me cope?
Really, it's just all about being there for them. And I know that's very cliche, but I think that to analyze that a little bit farther, you have to say, well, what does my spouse need from me? What kind of person are they, and what helps them? So with Amy, what helps her is when she gets to really just vent and she gets to talk and just convey her feelings. And I've noticed that as long as I'm being attentive and listening and responding when it's appropriate, there's always more for her to say, and there's always another layer, right? I'm just peeling back the onion, and the tears are included. And eventually you get to the point where we reach that core, like, this is what's really bothering me, or this is what I really want to have happen.
I think the big thing to remember here is that we're talking about how men are different than women, but also like each man is different and each woman is different. And so like he's saying he found what worked for me, and it might not be for your spouse. But we're just kind of sharing our experience.
And if you're the one who's pregnant and who maybe had a miscarriage, or even just in your marriage in general, your partnership, you should convey to your partner, if you know what helps you, tell them that. Don't make them guess and try to find it on their own. That sort of communication may seem trivial, or may seem like, oh, they should know this already. But that, I guarantee, would help quite a bit, both you and your partner. Well,
and I think you might think that what would help you would help your spouse. And so you'll try to do that thing to your spouse that would help yourself, but you're different. So they're going to do the things that help you, but you need to tell them what will help. And then vice versa. Just make sure you tell them and don't expect that you're going to feel the same way, because you are two different people. And then just my last thing is, do you have any other tips for couples to help each other through?
Just, well, I would say that the biggest thing is never assume that the other person is over it. I would say it's important to always be aware that because this happened, even though she's had 3 miscarriages now, and each one has been difficult and painful in its own different way, I can't assume that she's just over the first miscarriage. it doesn't really happen in a lot of ways. If you've ever known anyone who has suffered through a large amount of grief before, maybe has lost a loved one or has gone through some serious emotional crises, then you know that those scars don't go away very quickly, if at all. And they're sort of like rocks in your backpack that you're carrying for a very, very long time. So I would say that just because your partner may be happy in the moment doesn't necessarily mean that they're, perfectly over anything. So just be aware of that and understand that it's your role to make your partner happy. So.
Yeah. And sometimes you can't do anything. Like sometimes it's just, you do need to just give them time to grieve, and it is, at least for me, it's kind of a roller coaster where I'll seem totally fine for a week and then something will trigger me and I'll just be crying again and he'll have no idea why. And then when I mention it, he doesn't really understand why that would just come up again. Yeah, but I think as a woman it's kind of a roller coaster, but I think that was very helpful. Anything else you want to add?
Nope. I think that I would just say that if this is something that you're going through, I wish you the best, and I hope that this video helps, and I hope that you can, seek solace and seek comfort in people, and try not to, basically, I would just say stay healthy and try to cope with your grief in a healthy manner, and just know that there are other people out there who've been through a very similar thing who can be a support network for you, including this girl right here. So just good luck, and I wish you the best.
Okay, thank you so much.
No problem.
If you enjoyed this video and you liked Joshua being in my video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. And would you please comment below if you have any other ideas for spouses, so that if someone's watching this video, they can hear our tips, but I'd love if you guys had tips too, because like I said, everyone is a little bit different. So we'd love to hear what you have to say. And then if we, heaven forbid, have to go through this again, we can come back to this and see some of the tips you guys shared with me. And remember to subscribe to my channel. We would love to see you around here, and I will see you next time.
Bye.
You're making me all nervous.
What? I am?
Yeah. Okay.
Wow. Baby, it's your video.
Today we are going to talk about, what are we talking about? And I am really excited. Well, I shouldn't say excited about a video about this. Okay. Today I have my special best.
Special best. I think you should talk a little quieter.
Why?
Because you're talking really loud.
What was I saying?
I don't know.
And I will see you next time.
Bye.